They said the system was clear. They said the scanners were never wrong. They told him to pull his dog back and stop, but the dog didn't move. At gate 27, with 320 passengers about to board, a retired Navy SEAL felt that familiar chill in his chest, the one that always came just before disaster. His K-9 partner stood frozen, ears locked, body tense, eyes fixed on a single suitcase. To everyone else, it was routine luggage. To the dog, it was a threat no machine could detect. While officials argued over rules and schedules, the countdown had already started. Seconds mattered. This isn't a story about authority. It's a story about trust, about instinct, and about the warning that saved hundreds of lives. Because sometimes, the hero who sees the truth walks on four legs. Denver, Colorado, woke beneath a low ceiling of winter-gray clouds. A thin, cold drizzle swept across the city, clinging to glass and concrete, turning runways into mirrors. At Denver International Airport, planes taxied with mechanical calm, engines humming like nothing in the world could possibly go wrong. Inside Terminal A, Gate 27, routine ruled everything. Until it didn't. Ryan Cole felt it before he saw it. Ryan Cole was 42, tall and solid in a way that came from function, not vanity. His shoulders still carried the width of a man who once wore body armor daily, though time had softened the edges. His hair was cut short, military habit clinging long after the uniform was gone, with gray beginning to creep in at the temples. A faint scar ran along his left forearm, half hidden beneath the sleeve of his DHS jacket, one of many marks he no longer explained. His face was calm, almost unreadable, but his eyes told a different story. Steel gray and perpetually alert, they belonged to someone who had learned the hard way that danger rarely announced itself. Ryan had been a Navy SEAL for 16 years. Afghanistan had been his last theater. He left the teams not because he wanted to, but because his body finally forced the issue. A damaged knee, a concussion that never fully faded, and memories that refused to stay buried. Now, he worked airport security as a K-9 handler. Beside him walked Axel. Axel was a 6-year-old Belgian Malinois, lean and athletic, his body all sinew and discipline. His short fawn coat was marked by a dark mask that made his amber eyes look almost unnervingly intelligent. There were faint scars on his muzzle and flank, souvenirs from overseas work, though his movements remained smooth, controlled, efficient. Axel was not excitable. He did not bark for attention or pull at his lead. When he reacted, it meant something. Ryan trusted Axel more than any machine. They moved slowly through the terminal, part of a routine random sweep. Passengers glanced at them with mild curiosity, some smiling at the dog, others stepping aside instinctively. The smell of coffee, jet fuel, and damp winter coats hung in the air. Gate 27 buzzed with pre-boarding energy. A wide-body aircraft sat beyond the windows, rain streaking down its fuselage. Families clustered together. Business travelers checked watches. Everything was normal. Then Axel stopped, not abruptly, not dramatically. He simply refused to take another step. Ryan felt the leash go taut in his hand. "Axel," he said quietly. The dog did not move. Axel's posture changed in subtle but unmistakable ways. His ears locked forward, his breathing slowed, his tail stiffened, not raised in alarm, but held perfectly still. His gaze fixed on a black hard-shell suitcase resting on the baggage belt, already cleared and tagged for loading. Ryan's pulse spiked. He knelt beside Axel, fingers brushing the dog's harness. "Show me." Axel sat, hard alert. Ryan swallowed. He knew this behavior, He had seen it before, once, twice, 3 times, each time just before explosives were discovered overseas. Same stillness, same refusal to disengage. The scanner nearby glowed green. Safe. Ryan didn't look at it. Across the belt, a man cleared his throat loudly. Mark Hensley stepped forward. Mark Hensley was in his mid-50s, thick-set, with thinning hair combed carefully to project authority. His uniform was pressed, his badge polished to a shine. He had spent most of his career climbing administrative ladders, learning how to manage risk on paper rather than in real life. Procedure was his shield. Embarrassment was his enemy. "What's the problem?" Hensley asked, eyes flicking between the dog and the growing audience of passengers. "My K9 is alerting," Ryan said evenly. Hensley glanced at the scanner. "That bag's been cleared." "Axel disagrees," Hensley exhaled sharply. "We don't delay international flights because a dog feels like it." Ryan rose to his feet. "Axel doesn't feel, he detects." A few passengers began to stare openly now. Phones hovered uncertainly in hands. Hensley lowered his voice. "You're going to cause panic." "I'm trying to prevent it." Hensley motioned to a nearby TSA officer. "Run it again." The suitcase went back through the scanner. The image resolved cleanly. No anomalies. No flags. "Clear," the officer said. Hensley turned back to Ryan with a tight smile. "There, system says safe." Ryan crouched again, eyes never leaving Axel. "Buddy?" Axel did not break focus, not even a blink. Ryan's mind flashed backward, unbidden. A dusty road outside Kandahar. A shepherd freezing mid-step. A lieutenant waving it off. Minutes later, fire and screaming metal. Same posture, same mistake. "This is not a false alert," Ryan said quietly. Hensley's patience snapped. "Enough. You're holding up boarding." Axel let out a low, restrained growl. Not aggressive, not loud. A warning. The sound cut through the terminal. Silence followed. From the edge of the crowd, a woman watched. Emily Parker stood near a maintenance access door, arms folded tightly across her chest. Emily was 34, slim, with dark hair pulled into a practical ponytail. She wore a reflective vest over civilian clothes, a smear of grease darkening one sleeve. Her posture was slightly tense, as if she were always bracing for something to go wrong. She was an aerospace engineer by training, assigned to maintenance oversight. Years earlier, she had missed a small discrepancy during a routine audit. The error hadn't killed anyone, but it had come close. Since then, she trusted documentation less than she trusted patterns. And something about this moment felt wrong. She stepped forward. "Mark," Emily said, voice controlled but firm. "I need to flag something." Hensley turned, irritation flaring. "This isn't the time." "It is," Emily replied. "There's an electronic component in the maintenance bay that doesn't match the aircraft's inventory. It showed up overnight, no paperwork, no authorization." Ryan's head snapped toward her. Axel's ears twitched. Hensley scoffed. "That's unrelated." "Maybe," Emily said. "Or maybe it isn't." The crowd murmured louder now. Anxiety crept in. Hensley pinched the bridge of his nose. "I am not shutting down a gate because of coincidences." Ryan stood. "Then you're ignoring evidence." Hensley jabbed a finger toward Axel. "You're anthropomorphizing a dog." Ryan's voice dropped. "You're underestimating one." Axel remained seated, immovable, guarding the suitcase like a sentry. Ryan felt it settle deep in his chest. This wasn't over. Whatever Axel smelled wasn't going anywhere, and neither was he. The drizzle outside thickened into a steady, needling rain, tapping the terminal windows with quiet insistence. Inside Gate 27, the air grew tight, compressed by impatience and the unspoken fear that something, anything, might delay departure. Ryan Cole felt that pressure settle across his shoulders as surely as body armor once had. He stood beside the baggage belt, Axel still seated at his heel, the leash slack but alive with intent. The black hardshell suitcase continued its slow, indifferent crawl along the conveyor, the green, cleared tag flapping softly with each vibration. Around them, murmurs swelled and ebbed like surf. Ryan straightened and addressed Mark Hensley again. "I'm requesting a temporary lockdown of the baggage area." Hensley turned sharply. "Denied." Ryan didn't flinch. "This is a formal request." "Hear me clearly," Hensley said, voice firm and practiced. "The federal scanning system says clean, 2 passes. You don't shut down an international gate because a dog won't disengage." Axel shifted, not away, toward the belt. The Malinois rose to his feet, muscles tightening beneath his short coat. His ears flattened slightly as his front paw reached out, once, twice, scraping against the metal lip of the conveyor. The sound was sharp, wrong, like fingernails on steel. Several passengers gasped. Ryan's breath caught. He had only seen that behavior twice before, both times in Afghanistan. Axel never pawed like that unless the scent was masked, hidden behind layers designed to fool machines. Explosives cut with polymers, shielded compounds, human ingenuity aimed at deception. "Axel," Ryan murmured, but he didn't pull him back. Hensley's face reddened. "Control your dog." Ryan's eyes stayed on the paw, on the precise, deliberate movement. "He is controlled." The scraping continued, rhythmic and urgent. Emily Parker watched from the edge of the scene, heart thudding. She had stepped back toward the maintenance corridor moments earlier, unable to ignore a different kind of alert, the kind that lived in data rather than air. On her tablet, she pulled up the aircraft schematics again. The digital blueprint glowed cool blue beneath the terminal lights. Something was off. The modification was subtle, almost elegant. A rerouted line here, a slightly altered compartment outline there. Changes small enough to pass unnoticed during routine checks, especially on a busy morning with weather delays stacking pressure onto every department. Emily's fingers trembled as she zoomed in. "No," she whispered. The aft service area showed an access path that didn't match the original manufacturer's layout. Not a new addition, an adjustment. Someone had edited the file and resaved it with a timestamp from weeks ago. She looked up toward Gate 27, just as Axel's paw struck the belt again. Across the gate, a man hovered near the seating area, his presence increasingly conspicuous. He was in his late 40s, average height, with narrow shoulders and a receding hairline dampened by sweat despite the cool terminal air. His name, according to the boarding pass he checked far too often, was Evan Brooks. Evan Brooks wore a charcoal coat that hung awkwardly from his frame, as if he had lost weight recently and hadn't bothered to replace it. His eyes were restless, darting between the gate desk, the baggage belt, and the large windows overlooking the aircraft. He paced, stopped, paced again. Each time the boarding announcement chimed and then fell silent, his jaw tightened. Evan had returned to Gate 27 3 times in the last 15 minutes, a gate agent noticed. So did Ryan. Their eyes met briefly. Evan looked away too fast. "Mark," Ryan said quietly, never breaking his gaze. "There's more than one red flag now," Hensley scoffed. "You're seeing ghosts." Axel let out a short, sharp bark, controlled, not aggressive, then resumed pawing at the belt. The suitcase juddered slightly under the repeated impact. A woman near the front clutched her purse. A businessman swore under his breath. Phones came up. Emily stepped forward, voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Mark, I need you to look at this." Hensley shot her an exasperated look. "Emily, not now." "It is now," she said, holding up her tablet. The aircraft schematics were altered, slightly. Someone modified the layout weeks ago and buried the change in the system. That landed differently. Hensley's eyes flicked to the screen despite himself. "Maintenance updates happen all the time." "Not like this," Emily replied. "This wasn't logged properly, and the change corresponds to the aft section, near where the baggage feeds." Ryan felt a cold clarity settle in his gut. Masked scent, modified layout. He looked down at Axel. "Good boy," he whispered. Evan Brooks paced again, faster now. He approached the gate desk, leaned in, then pulled back when the agent shook her head. He wiped his palms on his coat and glanced toward the baggage belt. His eyes lingered on the suitcase for a fraction of a second too long. Ryan stepped subtly between Evan and the belt. Hensley noticed. "What are you doing now?" "Watching," Ryan said. Axel's pawing escalated. 3 quick scrapes, then a forceful push. The suitcase rocked on the belt. "That's it," Hensley snapped. "You're done. Pull the dog back." Ryan didn't move. "You are not trained to ignore that behavior," Ryan said. "Neither am I." Hensley opened his mouth to argue, but the gate agent's voice cut through the noise. "Mark, boarding is backing up. We need a decision." Emily swallowed. "Mark, if I'm right—" "And if you're wrong," Hensley shot back. "We ground a flight, spark a panic, and I explained to federal oversight why I let a K-9 override certified systems." Axel froze again, paw suspended mid-air, nose pressed so close to the IA belt that his breath fogged the metal. Ryan's voice dropped, carrying the weight of experience rather than volume. "If I'm wrong, we delay people. If I'm right, we save them." A silence fell, thin, fragile. Evan Brooks stopped pacing. His hand tightened around his phone. Emily took a step closer to Ryan. "The schematic edit wasn't random," she said. "It's precise. Whoever did it knew what they were hiding." Hensley's jaw worked as he weighed reputations against risk. He glanced at the growing crowd, the phones, the dog that would not disengage. "Stand by," he said finally, speaking into his radio. "Hold boarding. I need—" Evan Brooks turned abruptly and walked away from gate 27, disappearing into the flow of passengers. Ryan noticed. Axel noticed too. The Malinois stopped pawing and lifted his head, tracking Evan's retreating form with laser focus. Ryan followed his gaze, pulse hammering. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. The rain outside intensified, drumming against the terminal roof with a hollow insistence that echoed Ryan Cole's pulse. Gate 27 had gone from restless to brittle. Boarding remained on hold, an uneasy pause stretching thinner with every second. Axel stood rigid at Ryan's side, nose no longer fixed on the suitcase, but angling repeatedly toward the aft direction of the aircraft, as if the truth had shifted location or revealed its source. Ryan followed the line of Axel's muzzle. Not the belt, not the crowd, the back of the plane. "Captain Grant," Ryan said quietly. Lucas Grant turned from the jet bridge entrance, where he had been fielding questions from a flight attendant. Up close, Lucas looked older than his uniform suggested. Lines at the corners of his eyes carved by years of long-haul nights and responsibility. He carried himself with an easy authority that didn't require volume. a pilot who had learned to listen to small warnings because the sky rarely forgave arrogance. "What is it?" Lucas asked. Ryan gestured subtly toward Axel. "He's not focused on the bag anymore," Lucas frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means the bag may be a decoy," Ryan said, "or the scent trail leads somewhere else." Mark Hensley overheard and spun around, his patience evaporating. "This is getting out of hand," he snapped. "First a suitcase, now the entire aircraft. You're fishing." Ryan met his glare. "I'm remembering." Lucas's brow furrowed. "Remembering what?" Ryan hesitated, not because he lacked words, but because he knew exactly where they would take him. He exhaled. 6 years ago, Helmand Province. We were escorting a supply convoy. Everything checked clean. Scanners, dogs, intel. Then my K9, Rook, froze. Same posture Axel showed today. Nose tracking, refusing to disengage. Lucas listened, silent. "The call was made to move forward," Ryan continued. "Command didn't want delays. The blast came from underneath the vehicle behind us. Secondary device. Shaped to vent upward. We lost 2 men. Rook died instantly." A murmur rippled through the nearby passengers, who had drifted close enough to hear fragments. Ryan's voice remained steady, but his hands clenched. "This feels the same. Masked materials, misleading indicators, a primary distraction while the real threat sits where no one is looking." Lucas absorbed that, his jaw tightening. He glanced at the aircraft through the rain-streaked glass. "And you're saying the aft hold?" Axel's ears flicked as if answering for him. The dog took 2 slow steps forward, nose sweeping low, tracking along the invisible path that led away from the gate and toward the rear service corridor. "Yes," Ryan said. "That's where he's pointing." Hensley exploded. "Absolutely not! You don't accuse an aircraft of being compromised based on a war story." Ryan turned on him. "You think trauma makes instincts unreliable? It doesn't. It sharpens them." Hensley jabbed a finger toward Ryan's chest. "You're done here. One more disruption, and I'll have your credentials pulled." Lucas stepped between them. "Mark," he said, calm but immovable. "Stand down." Hensley stared at him. "Captain, with respect." "With respect," Lucas cut in. "This is my aircraft, and I'm not boarding until I'm satisfied." Hensley's face flushed a dangerous red. "You don't have authority to—" "I do," Lucas replied, "and I'm exercising it. 5 minutes." The word hung there, final. Hensley turned away, furious, already tapping his radio. "If this blows back on us—" "It won't," Lucas said. "Not if we're right." Emily Parker stood a few steps back, unnoticed in the clash of authority, her tablet cradled against her chest. While voices rose, she moved the way she always did when things went wrong, quietly, methodically. She had already accessed the aircraft's maintenance server. Her fingers flew, copying files, duplicating logs, exporting the altered schematics to a secure drive she kept encrypted for moments like this. Emily wasn't brave in the cinematic sense. She didn't confront. She documented. Years ago, her silence had almost cost lives. She would not repeat that mistake. She glanced up as Axel shifted again, nose lifting, drawing a longer arc through the air. The scent trail was stronger now, clearer. Emily followed his gaze and felt her stomach drop. The aft service corridor entrance sat just beyond a restricted door, guarded but accessible. Ryan noticed her look. "You see it too?" Emily nodded once. "The edits align with the rear compartment. If someone wanted to hide something structural, that's where they'd do it." Hensley snapped his radio shut and turned back. "You're all making a very expensive error." Ryan stepped closer, lowering his voice. Then let me be the one who pays. Axel suddenly pulled, just enough to make his intent unmistakable. His nose pressed toward the aft direction again, breathing deeper now, urgency sharpening his movements. He wasn't alerting on people. He wasn't distracted by carry-ons. His world had narrowed to one place. Lucas watched the dog, then the handler, then the plane. He had learned long ago that the most dangerous phrase in aviation was "it's probably nothing." 5 minutes, Lucas said again. That's all I need to decide. Hensley threw his hands up. You're risking your career. Lucas didn't look at him. I risk it every time I fly. Across the gate, Sarah Whitman had moved closer. She was tall and slender, her gray coat hanging straight from narrow shoulders, her posture composed in a way that spoke of practiced restraint. Her pale eyes were fixed on Axel, on the way the dog kept pulling his attention toward the same unseen point. Sarah's husband had died in a transport accident 12 years earlier. The investigation concluded mechanical failure. She had learned to read between official lines since then, to notice the moments when certainty felt forced. She caught Ryan's eye. If you're right, she said quietly, then waiting is the only sane thing to do. Ryan nodded, grateful but focused. The terminal clock ticked forward. Boarding announcements stalled. Passengers shifted, complained, waited. Emily finished her copy and slipped the drive into her pocket, heart pounding. Whatever happened next, the truth would not disappear. Axel held his position, nose aimed unerringly toward the rear of the aircraft, body coiled with purpose. Ryan felt the past pressing in, but he did not look away. Not this time. The service corridor behind Gate 27 smelled of cold metal and oil, a place passengers never saw and never thought about. The hum of the terminal faded here, replaced by a lower, more ominous throb, the aircraft's auxiliary systems breathing quietly as if asleep. Ryan Cole moved with Axel at his heel, their shadows stretched thin by fluorescent lights that flickered with age. They were not authorized to be here. That was the truth of it. But it was also the truth that had stopped mattering. Captain Lucas Grant had not escorted them. He had simply looked at Ryan, then at the aft service door, and turned away. The kind of permission that wasn't written down, but carried all the weight of command. Lucas stood watch at the gate, answering questions with calm deflection, buying time he knew he could never get back. Ryan pressed his badge to the reader. The light blinked amber, access restricted. He exhaled once, then tried again as Axel's nose lifted, breath quickening. The door clicked. Inside, the cargo bay yawned open like a steel lung. Pallets sat locked in place, netting taut. The floor scored with years of use. It was colder here, the air dense and unmoving. Ryan felt the old instincts rise without effort, each step measured, each sound catalogued. Easy, he whispered. Axel did not need the reminder. The Malinois moved forward, nose low, sweeping in slow arcs that grew tighter with every step. His body language had shifted again. No confusion now, no searching. This was approach. This was confirmation. Ryan's watch vibrated once. 12 hours and 12 minutes until boarding was scheduled to complete. Find it, Ryan murmured. Axel stopped near a maintenance crate bolted against the aft bulkhead. The crate was unremarkable. Industrial gray, scuffed, labeled with hazard warnings so generic they were almost invisible. Ryan had walked past 1,000 like it in his life. That was the point. Axel sat. Then he pawed, once, softly. Ryan's pulse slowed instead of racing. Fear sharpened into clarity. He crouched, eyes scanning the crate. A small, rectangular object was mounted to the side, disguised with industrial casing, wires neatly sleeved. Everything designed to look boring. Too boring. Ryan leaned closer and saw it. A compact device no bigger than a paperback book, its face masked beneath a casing stamped emergency power unit. A fake. The edges were too clean, the screws too new, and beneath the casing, he could see the faint outline of a digital timer, its glow carefully shielded. A micro-timed charge. Ryan felt his throat go dry. "Good boy," he breathed. Axel remained perfectly still, eyes fixed on the device, as if daring it to move. Ryan tapped his comm. "Captain." Lucas's voice came back instantly, low and controlled. "Talk to me." "We have it," Ryan said. Timed device, disguised as an industrial backup battery. Aft hold. Silence on the line. Then Lucas exhaled slowly. "How long?" Ryan checked his eye. "Watch again." 11:18. "Less than 12 minutes to full boarding. Unknown trigger window." "Copy," Lucas said. "I'm holding them." Ryan clipped Axel's leash shorter, anchoring him a step back from the device. "Stay." Axel obeyed without hesitation. Up in the terminal, Emily Parker stood with her back to a pillar, phone pressed to her ear, eyes on the security monitors. She looked composed to anyone passing by, but inside her chest, her heart hammered. "Run it again," she told the maintenance tech on the line. "Serial numbers, vendor logs, all of it." Emily's reflection stared back at her from the glass, dark eyes focused, jaw set. Years ago, her hesitation had nearly cost lives. Today, she moved without doubt. The tech cursed softly. "It's not a battery," he said. "The component flagged missing from inventory. It's a trigger assembly, industrial grade, military adapted." Emily closed her eyes for half a second. "So it's confirmed?" "Yes." Emily ended the call and opened the copied files on her tablet, pulling up the vendor history. A name appeared. Shell Company, recently dissolved. She screenshotted everything, time-stamped it, then sent the packet to a secure internal address Lucas had given her earlier without explanation. She looked up at the monitor bank. The camera feed that had been tracking Evan Brooks flickered, then went empty. Evan Brooks was gone. The hallway camera near Gate 27 showed only passing travelers and a janitor pushing a cart. No sign of the man who had paced and returned and paced again. Emily's skin prickled. She toggled to the exterior cameras. Nothing. He had vanished into the airport's blind spots with practiced ease. Emily whispered. He knew. Back in the cargo bay, Ryan studied the device without touching it. He had disarmed bombs before, in places where help was hours away. But this was different. This wasn't his call to make. "Captain," Ryan said into the comm, "we need EOD." Lucas's answer was immediate. "Already on the way. Security too. Mark is not happy." Ryan almost smiled. "Good." He glanced at the timer again. 8:09:42. Axel shifted his weight, then froze again, eyes flicking to the far corner of the bay. Ryan followed his gaze and felt a new chill. The scent trail didn't end at the device. It looped. "Axel," Ryan whispered. The dog's ears pricked, nose sweeping once more, tracing a faint arc that led away from the crate toward the access panel near the bulkhead. Ryan's stomach tightened. "Captain," he said carefully, "there may be more than one component." Lucas didn't answer immediately. Up at the gate, Mark Hensley was shouting into his radio, his face flushed, authority fraying. He had just been informed, without details, that boarding was being halted indefinitely. His career, his reputation, everything he had guarded with procedure was unraveling. "You can't do this," Hensley snapped. "Not without proof." Lucas met his gaze evenly. "We have proof." Hensley laughed, sharp and brittle. "From a dog?" Lucas leaned in just enough to make his voice carry weight. from a team that didn't look away. Hensley opened his mouth to argue again, but the sound of approaching footsteps cut him off. Airport security rounded the corner, followed by two figures in dark jackets marked EOD. Time shifted. Back in the cargo bay, Ryan held Axel steady, eyes flicking between the device and the access panel the dog had indicated. He did not move closer. He did not touch anything. He waited. 07:05. The timer glowed faintly beneath the casing, indifferent to panic, to authority, to consequence. Axel's breathing remained calm, steady, unwavering. A working dog, doing exactly what he had been trained to do. Ryan placed a hand on Axel's shoulder, grounding himself in the warmth of living muscle and trust. "You saved them," he whispered. "All of them." Axel didn't look at him. His eyes stayed on the threat. Because the work was not finished. The airport changed its posture in an instant. What had been hesitation became movement. What had been argument became command. Steel shutters rolled down at the end of the concourse. Red strobes ignited above Gate 27, washing the terminal walls in emergency light. A recorded voice echoed through Denver International Airport, calm and utterly false in its reassurance. "Attention, please. This area is temporarily restricted. Please follow staff instructions." Passengers protested. Phones rose. Panic hovered, restrained only by confusion. The airport was officially locked down. In the service corridor near the aft hold, Ryan Cole felt the shift before he heard it. The vibration of boots on concrete. The clipped cadence of people who did not run, but moved fast enough to make running unnecessary. The bomb squad had arrived. The lead technician stepped into the cargo bay first. His name was Aaron Delgado, mid-40s, broad-shouldered beneath a heavy blast vest, face calm in the way only men who had stared at death too many times could manage. His helmet was tucked under one arm, close-cropped dark hair damp with sweat despite the cold. Delgado's reputation preceded him, methodical, unflappable, unwilling to rush even when clocks screamed. Behind him followed two more EOD technicians, their movements precise, deliberate, every step rehearsed 1,000 times before. Delgado's eyes went immediately to the device, then to Axel. He paused. "That your dog?" Delgado asked Ryan. "Yes," Delgado nodded once. "Good dog." Ryan didn't reply. His focus was on Axel, who remained planted exactly where he had been, body aligned toward the device and the access panel beyond. The Malinois had not moved since the team entered. His breathing was slow, controlled. His ears flicked only once, acknowledging the newcomers, then returned forward. Delgado crouched several feet away. "Timer's live," he said quietly. "Micro trigger, industrial disguise, clean work." Ryan swallowed. "How long?" Delgado checked his handheld monitor. 9 minutes, give or take. Behind them, Mark Hensley appeared at the corridor entrance, his face pale beneath the harsh fluorescent lights. His uniform jacket hung open, his badge crooked. Authority clung to him by habit alone now. "I want it on record," Hensley said sharply, "that I followed federal procedure. The system cleared." Delgado didn't look up. "Not the time," Hensley bristled. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under." Ryan turned slowly. "You understand it perfectly. You just chose optics over lives." Hensley opened his mouth to respond, then snapped it shut as Delgado raised a hand. "Both of you," Delgado said calmly. "I need quiet." Ryan stepped back half a pace, but not away from Axel. "Handler," Delgado said, finally looking at him directly. "When we move in, you'll need to pull the dog out." "No," Ryan said. The word was flat. "Absolute." Delgado studied him. "This isn't a suggestion." Ryan met his gaze without blinking. Axel is the only thing keeping that timer from accelerating. Delgado's brow furrowed. Explain. Ryan nodded toward the device. Pressure-sensitive secondary sensor. Axel's presence stabilizes it. His scent, his heat signature. It's keeping the circuit in a dormant state. You move him, you risk triggering the failsafe. Delgado glanced back at the device, then at Axel again. He had seen stranger things. He had learned long ago not to dismiss information simply because it came from an unexpected source. You trained for this? Delgado asked. Ryan's voice was quiet. In a different war. Delgado exhaled slowly. Then you stay. But if anything shifts, I pull you both. Ryan didn't argue. Fair. Up in the terminal, Emily Parker stood in front of a row of senior managers who had finally run out of excuses. She had projected the data onto a large screen. Maintenance logs, schematic edits, vendor histories, access timestamps. The evidence was clean, undeniable, and damning. This component was altered 6 weeks ago, Emily said, her voice steady despite the weight of the room pressing down on her. The edit was buried under routine updates. The trigger assembly was removed from inventory and replaced with a false entry. This wasn't a failure. It was exploitation. One of the executives shifted uncomfortably. Why wasn't this flagged? Emily met his eyes. Because the system is designed to detect accidents, not intent. Silence followed. Emily continued. You can fire people later. Right now, you need to acknowledge the gap. A security director cleared his throat. We'll issue a statement. Emily shook her head. You'll issue the truth. Down in the cargo bay, the countdown ticked. 06:12. Delgado and his team moved closer, instruments extended, bodies angled carefully to avoid sudden shifts in air pressure. The robot sat idle. There was no room for remote handling here. Axel remained motionless. Ryan knelt beside him, one hand resting gently at the base of the dog's neck, fingers barely touching fur. He felt the steady rhythm of Axel's heartbeat beneath his palm. Calm, present, working. You're doing great, Ryan whispered, barely audible. Axel did not look at him. Delgado extended a fiber optic scope, sliding it into a narrow seam in the casing. His breath slowed. Secondary sensor confirmed, he said. Handler's right. Hensley's face drained of color. Ryan didn't look at him. 04:58. A sharp beep sounded from Delgado's monitor. He stilled instantly. Everyone froze. Axel's ears flicked. His breathing remained unchanged. Delgado waited, then nodded. False fluctuation. We're good. Ryan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. In the terminal, Sarah Whitman sat alone now, her seat surrounded by empty space. She had refused evacuation, citing a knee injury that didn't exist. She watched the flashing lights through the glass, hands folded calmly in her lap. She thought of her husband, of unanswered questions, of the quiet lie of mechanical failure. For the first time in years, she felt something close to hope. 03:21. Delgado reached for the casing screws. This is it, he said softly. Ryan's hand tightened on Axel's collar, not restraining, just anchoring. You're not alone, Ryan murmured. Axel remained steady. The screw turned. Nothing happened. Another. Still nothing. Hensley squeezed his eyes shut. 01:44. Delgado removed the casing fully. The timer glowed naked now, numbers bleeding downward with mechanical indifference. Cutting power, Delgado said. Ryan felt Axel tense for the first time. Not panic, but readiness. The wire snapped. The timer froze. Silence crashed into the space like a wave. Then Delgado exhaled. Device neutralized. Ryan sagged slightly, knees threatening to give. He wrapped both arms briefly around Axel's neck, pressing his forehead into the dog's fur. "You did it," he whispered. "You saved them." Axel finally turned his head and looked at him. Just once. Hensley slumped against the wall, shaking. In the terminal, Emily lowered her tablet as confirmation came through the internal channel. She closed her eyes for a long second, then stood taller. The truth was out. The gap was exposed, and the disaster had been stopped with less than 2 minutes to spare. The airport exhaled, not all at once and not loudly, but in small human ways, shoulders lowered, voices softened. The sharp edge of panic dulled into disbelief and then into relief. At Denver International Airport, Gate 27 slowly reopened, sunlight breaking through the thinning clouds outside, as if the sky itself had decided to forgive the morning. More than 320 passengers were alive because a clock had stopped. Ryan Cole stood near the service corridor doors, Axel seated calmly at his side, both of them finally still. The adrenaline that had carried Ryan through the last hour ebbed, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion that made his legs feel heavier than any rucksack he had ever worn. Axel leaned slightly into him, solid and warm, as if reminding Ryan that this moment was real. They had done it. The bomb had been disarmed. The threat was gone. Captain Lucas Grant approached them first. Lucas looked different now, lighter, though the lines of responsibility were still etched into his face. He removed his cap and held it under his arm, a quiet sign of respect rather than rank. He stopped in front of Ryan and Axel, taking a moment before speaking. "You saved my aircraft," Lucas said. "You saved everyone on it." Ryan shook his head once. "I didn't." Lucas followed Ryan's gaze down to Axel. Axel sat tall, ears relaxed, eyes alert but peaceful. His tongue flicked out once, tasting the air as if this were any other day at work. Lucas nodded slowly. "Then thank him for me." "I do," Ryan replied. "Every day." Nearby, airport security and federal agents moved with a different kind of urgency now, documenting, sealing evidence, escorting personnel for statements. Among them was Mark Hensley. Mark no longer looked like the man who had barked orders and clung to protocol that morning. His jacket was gone. His badge sat clipped to a folder in an agent's hand. He stood rigid, face gray, eyes fixed on the floor as the consequences of his choices finally caught up to him. He didn't look at Ryan. He didn't need to. 2 hours later, in a quiet conference room overlooking the runway, the official debrief began. Ryan sat at one end of the table, Axel lying at his feet, chin resting on his paws. Across from them sat representatives from Federal Aviation Security, DHS, and Airport Administration. At the far end stood Emily Parker. Emily looked composed, but there was a new steadiness in her posture, something earned, not given. Her dark hair was still pulled back in the same practical ponytail, her clothes unremarkable, but her presence commanded attention now. She didn't speak emotionally. She didn't dramatize. She showed them the truth. Screens filled with data, altered schematics, unauthorized edits, inventory discrepancies, access logs. The story was clear, undeniable, and deeply uncomfortable. The system had worked exactly as designed, just not as intended. This wasn't a failure of people noticing, Emily said evenly. It was a failure of people listening. Silence followed. When the meeting ended, the decisions were swift. Mark Hensley's employment was terminated effective immediately, pending further investigation for negligence and deliberate suppression of a credible security threat. No press conference, no defense, just removal. Emily Parker was promoted within the week. Her new title, Director of Aviation Safety Systems, came with authority, budget, and a mandate to rebuild protocols from the ground up. For the first time since that near miss years ago, Emily felt the weight on her chest lift. This time, she had spoken. This time, it had mattered. Outside, on the tarmac, a small ceremony was quietly assembled. It wasn't flashy, no cameras at first, just uniforms, flags, and a sense that something important deserved to be marked. Axel sat perfectly still as a uniformed official knelt to place a ribboned medallion around his neck, the National K-9 Service Medal, awarded only a handful of times each year. The medal gleamed against his short fawn coat, the dark mask of his face giving him a dignified, almost solemn expression. Applause broke out. Axel blinked. Ryan stepped forward, instinctively reaching for the medallion as if to adjust it, then stopping himself. He cleared his throat when someone handed him a microphone. "I don't like speeches," Ryan said. A few soft laughs rippled through the crowd. "They're calling me a hero," he continued, voice steady but quiet. "They're wrong." He looked down at Axel, resting a hand on the dog's shoulder. "It wasn't me," Ryan said. "It was him." The applause that followed was louder, warmer, and carried something deeper than celebration, gratitude. In the days that followed, the story spread, not sensationalized, not exaggerated, just told. A retired Navy SEAL, a K-9 who refused to move, a disaster that never happened. Ryan was offered a position he hadn't known he wanted until it was placed in front of him. Head of Federal K-9 Security Operations. Oversight. Training. Authority to make sure no warning like Axel's was ever ignored again. He accepted on one condition. Axel would retire. The Malinois was 7 now. He had done his work. He had earned his rest. That winter, Ryan and Axel moved back to the foothills of Colorado, to a small house with a fenced yard and a view of the mountains. Axel learned the strange joy of sleeping in sunlit patches on the floor, of walking without a harness, of being a dog without a mission. Sometimes when planes passed overhead, Axel would lift his head. Ryan would smile and scratch behind his ears. "It's okay," he'd say. "We're off duty." Lucas Grant remained in contact. He made a point of publicly defending Ryan when questions arose about procedure and authority. In interviews, Lucas was clear. Trusting the dog had been the only correct decision. Sarah Whitman sent a letter. It was short, handwritten. She thanked Ryan for giving families answers they would never have to ask. She said she slept better now. On a clear autumn morning, Ryan stood on his porch, coffee cooling in his hand, Axel sitting beside him as the sun crept over the mountains. Ryan didn't wear a uniform anymore. He didn't need one. Because sometimes the greatest heroes don't wear medals on their chests. Sometimes they walk on 4 legs, and sometimes they teach the rest of us when to listen. Cache 2. Morning came gently to Denver, as if the city itself wanted to apologize. The rain had washed the night clean. Sunlight slipped through thinning clouds and spread across the tarmac in pale gold bands. From the terminal windows, the aircraft that had nearly become a tomb now stood quiet and intact, service crews moving around it with careful reverence. Inside the airport, the emergency lights were dark, the shutters raised, the hum of routine restored. But something fundamental had shifted. More than 320 lives had gone home the night before. Ryan Cole stood near Gate 27, hands in the pockets of his worn jacket, Axel sitting at his left side with the easy stillness of a dog who knew his work was finished. Ryan looked tired in the honest way, eyes shadowed, shoulders loose, the adrenaline long since drained. He had slept in a chair in the quiet room near security, boots still on, Axel curled against his legs like a living anchor. Axel looked no different than he ever did, lean, alert, amber eyes bright beneath his black mask. But something in his posture had softened. The tension that had defined him for days, maybe weeks, was gone. He leaned slightly into Ryan now, content, present, alive. A small crowd had gathered, mostly airport staff, a few officials, several passengers who had refused to leave before saying thank you. There were cameras too, though they kept a respectful distance, lenses lowered more often than raised. Captain Lucas Grant stood a few steps away, speaking quietly with a senior federal security director. Lucas looked composed, but there was a new protectiveness in his stance, a subtle positioning of his body between Ryan and the questions he knew would come. Lucas Grant had always believed in procedure. He still did, but he believed in people more now. And when the reports began to circulate, initial suggestions that the incident had been handled within protocol, Lucas had shut them down personally. No, he had said, it was handled because someone listened. He had put his name on that statement. Ryan noticed Lucas watching him and gave a small nod. Lucas returned it without hesitation. Nearby, Emily Parker stood with a tablet tucked under her arm, hair pulled back in its usual practical style, though she had exchanged her grease-marked vest for a simple blazer. She looked different, not outwardly, but in the way people looked when they had crossed a line they could never step back from. Emily had spent the early hours in a conference room with executives, auditors, and federal investigators. She had laid out the data calmly, without accusation, without drama. The altered schematics, the missing trigger assembly, the access logs, the systemic blind spots. She had not raised her voice. She hadn't needed to. By dawn, the language in the room had shifted from incident to failure, from procedure to culture. And by mid-morning, Emily Parker had been offered a new role, Director of System Safety and Oversight, reporting directly to federal partners. She had accepted with one condition: that we stop pretending accidents are the only thing we need to defend against. They had agreed. At the far edge of the gathering, Mark Hensley stood alone, flanked by two administrators. He looked smaller without his authority pressed neatly into place. Tie loosened, shoulders slumped, face drawn. The night had taken something from him that could not be returned. The report was brief, clear, unforgiving. Mark Hensley had not planted the device, but he had dismissed warnings. He had delayed escalation. He had prioritized optics over risk. By noon, his badge had been collected. He did not look at Ryan as he was escorted away. Ryan did not look back. A federal official stepped forward, clearing his throat. He was tall, silver-haired, with the careful smile of a man accustomed to ceremonies. "We'd like to recognize exceptional service," he began. There was polite applause. Ryan felt it coming and shifted his weight uncomfortably. He hated moments like this. They always felt too loud for something that had been so quiet and precise when it mattered. "Mr. Cole," the official said, "your actions directly contributed to the prevention of mass casualties. Your judgment, experience, and courage." Ryan raised a hand. "Sir," he said evenly, "if you're going to say my name, you need to say his too." He looked down. Axel sat calmly, ears relaxed, tail resting on the floor. "It wasn't me," Ryan said. "It was him." A murmur rippled through the crowd. The official paused, then smiled differently, less practiced, more genuine. Then let's do this properly. A small velvet case was opened. Inside lay a K9 National Service Medal, its ribbon dark blue, edged with silver. The handler knelt. The photographer snapped one respectful frame. Ryan took the medal, his hand steady now, and clipped it to Axel's harness. Axel didn't react. He never did, but his tail thumped once against the floor. The applause that followed was louder, warmer, and for once, Ryan didn't feel the urge to escape it. Later that afternoon, away from the cameras, a different conversation took place. The offer was direct, formal, carefully worded. Head of Federal K9 Security Operations. Ryan read it once, then again. He thought of deserts half a world away, of dogs who had done their jobs and not come home, of Axel standing between a timer and 300 strangers without hesitation. "I'll do it," Ryan said finally, "on one condition." The official waited. "That I get to stay hands-on with the dogs." The condition was accepted immediately. At another gate, Sarah Whitman sat alone, watching planes come and go. She had stayed overnight, not because she had nowhere to go, but because she needed to see the end of this with her own eyes. When she saw Ryan and Axel pass, she stood. "Thank you," she said simply. Ryan nodded. "You were calm yesterday." Sarah smiled faintly. "I've learned that panic wastes time." She didn't say her husband's name. She didn't need to. That evening, as the airport returned fully to itself, Ryan drove west. The mountains rose ahead of him, purple and blue in the fading light. Axel lay in the back seat, head resting against the window, eyes half closed. Their home waited in the foothills, quiet, unassuming, wrapped in pine and thin air. Axel would be listed as retired now, honorably, officially, but Ryan knew the truth. Axel would still watch the world, just from a porch instead of a cargo bay. Ryan parked as the first stars appeared. He opened the door and Axel stepped out, stretched, and looked around as if confirming something essential. "Home," Ryan said. Axel wagged his tail. That was enough. Sometimes in life, the loudest warnings do not come from screens, systems, or people in charge. They come from quiet instincts, from experience, from loyalty that refuses to walk away. This story reminds us that doing the right thing is not always about rank, titles, or being the smartest person in the room. It is about courage, about listening when something inside tells you this is not right, even if everyone else says it is fine. In our daily lives, we may not be stopping airplanes or saving hundreds of people, but we face moments where silence is easier than speaking up, where following the crowd feels safer than following truth. Let this story remind us that integrity still matters, that faithfulness, loyalty, and responsibility can change outcomes. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs encouragement today. Leave a comment and tell us what part stayed with you the most. And if you believe that God watches over those who choose courage and compassion, type Amen in the comments. May God bless you, protect you, and guide you on every path you walk.